People whose NDAs have expired. What secret can you finally reveal? Story 1. When I worked for state IT, we weren't supposed to provide details of what hardware was being used or operating systems. In the 90s, I took on an old server, souped it up, and put Linux on it to run our networks. This was pretty radical at the time because everyone else was using something proprietary, like NetWare, and I was able to deliver services for free, email and Samba. They were paying out the nose for. The NDA wasn't about security, it was about keeping how much money they were wasting under wraps. Story 2. If you are ever with an elderly loved one and they get a Medicare call, hang up. Hang up right away. I worked at a company in downtown Chicago this last year that was absolute nonsense. All these young agents are scamming old people, promising something about this new upgrade to their insurance when really they were just taking them off their plan. A lot of these people have Alzheimer's disease, and we'd get POAs calling in saying that we took their mother slash father slash aunt off a plan, and now they can't get back on their plan for an entire year. I finally quit because it was so horrific what we had to do to our elders to get a paycheck. I personally tried to do everything I could to not be slimy, but at the end of the day, the whole job was screwed. I took a man off his plan and was going to have him start a new one the following month. He didn't have his medication list on him, so told me he would email it to me. He finally emails me a list of at least 20 medications. One of his medications that was covered for like $20 on his plan would literally go up thousands of dollars on the plan I put him on. I called him back and spent 2 hours canceling what we had signed him up on. I still feel horrible to this day. Imagine if he forgot to send me that list of medication. Listen to me. As a past Medicare advisor, do not let your parents, grandparents take these calls. Medicare Advantage plans are dumb, and Medicare advisors are 20-some-year-old kids who will do anything to get them taken off their plan. Story 3. Worked for a company that built hip implants. Some of them were custom made to order based on CAT scans. The quality of the modeling was dubious, and we had several fabs where the implant bent in the patient. The company always blamed the patient for putting on too much weight. The company was also paying back physicians for ordering their custom implants, which were obviously more expensive than the standard ones, paid by public insurance. I quit the week I found this out, and I only knew the bare minimum of one case. This activity led to a legal case of fraud and other stuff. People, doctors, administrators of the company, went to jail or were fined. Somewhere in that process, and I still can't talk about some of the details, I signed multiple NDAs with a health agency covering lack of oversight and relevant communications. This was a cluster FCK on all levels: graft, corruption, material choices, medical controls. No one died, but the medical quality of services I was involved in was severely affected, and decades later it still bothers me. Lesson learned: keep an eye on regulatory aspects of your businesses. Story 4. When a pharmacy's stock of medication expires, they can't just throw it away. So they hire pharmaceutical waste disposal companies to take it away and dispose of it properly. The pharmacy I worked for bought expired medication and supplies under the table from one of these disposal companies and resold them at full price. Naming and shaming would be complicated because the business operated under a constantly changing chain of mail order pharmacies. When insurance companies would get enough complaints about one, they would deny coverage, at which point patients would be shuffled to another pharmacy in the chain, while the impacted pharmacy quietly closed and reopened under a new name. The good news: they were busted and folded pretty quickly under the weight of having to operate like an honest pharmacy. Company in question is no more. Story 5. The big financial houses in NYC knew about the impending crash at least 6 months before it started in 2007. I was at an investment conference when I heard the heavy hitters discussing it before going on stage. I will never forget the sentence. What do we do? Go out there and tell them we are all screwed? They proceeded to go out there and peddle their "everything is great" crap. I had never heard the word trench before that day. Story 6. I was working at a hospital as an intern. There was a woman who had a brain tumor a while ago. She got in for a checkup, 6 months pregnant and having depression. The doctor thought he found a new tumor, so she had another brain operation. But there was no tumor, and they cut her head open for nothing. And after she woke up, they didn't tell her this. Instead, acted like they removed it successfully. Story 7. I worked in the auto industry for a respected and highly ranked luxury brand. As a manager, we learned from corporate to teach the employees how to solicit a positive review, or more importantly, how to dissuade a negative review. We were using tactics that are beyond immoral and borderline illegal. A personal favorite was having to meet with a disgruntled customer, personally accept all the blame for whatever shortcoming, real or imagined, and tell them that the negative review will only affect the low level employee that was in their corner the whole time. Then offer them some freebies and excuse myself so the other employee could apologize. 99% of the time, the customer would take the employee's side and leave them a positive review. Occasionally, they called corporate to complain about me, which did absolutely nothing. They wanted those negative phone calls, as long as the actual online and mailed review was positive. Additionally, we would call people in for a free oil change, tire rotation, free floor mats, etc., and replace parts that were suspected in auto acceleration faults. They were trying to fix as many cars as possible to avoid a recall and bad publicity. In that case, it still became a big news story. The SUVs with a known defective engine that broke just outside warranty did not become a news story. Seeing people brag about their amazing car based on ratings still makes me cringe. If you use the ratings and reviews of vehicles to select a brand of car, don't. Most of them are skewed and exploited by certain manufacturers. Story 8. Chase Bank Mortgage Division uses outdated technology. It bought for hundreds of millions of dollars from Quicken and Rocket Mortgage. It's a DOS-based system that Quicken created around 20 years ago. They also purposely handicap their salespeople who work off commissions. To avoid paying out larger commissions if they are doing well, they will be pooled into receiving worse leads or put on special assignments that limit productivity. In worst-case scenarios, when a salesperson finds a way to break the system and make more money than Chase planned to pay out, they dig through the employees' chats or personal files to find reasons to terminate them. Chase also promotes internally to inflate their number of higher-level positions held by minorities. Sounds great on the surface, but they do so artificially. Typically, positions are filled by recruiting or HR. But whenever they want to bump the numbers, they open a position that only inclusion candidates can apply for. Inclusion candidates are code for non-white or non-disabled. These positions are usually for low-level management that is planned to be cut in the near future. Oh, and they give blatant preferential treatment to employees with children to avoid lawsuits. They lost a big one a few years back over fathers getting equal maternity leave time. Story 9. A new company took over a contract I worked on and sent everyone an email on Monday morning saying we had until Friday to accept a 20% pay cut or Friday would be our last day. I was a team lead. I had been part of the committee that hired every person on my team. They asked if I was staying. I told them that I was, but it was a big pay cut, and I understood if they left and would be happy to write them a letter of recommendation. They all stayed. I was under an NDA that precluded me from telling them that there were about 5 of us out of the 50 that all kept our previous pay rate. They obviously assumed that I was taking a pay cut with them by staying. I'm pretty sure that NDA wouldn't hold up in court, but I didn't know that at the time. It felt sleazy to treat my guys that way. Story 10. A friend of mine signed an NDA 10 years ago when he worked at an online movie rental company that famously destroyed Blockbuster to let it stay hidden. They were developing an app to watch movies on your phone, tablet, gaming console, Roku, etc. Huge game-changing shocker, I know. We may never find out which company this is, if they ever completed that app, and how we knew they were going to make one. Story 11. Big companies that have life insurance as a benefit of employment are a total racket. What they will do, for example, is tell you they have a $100,000 policy for you, should you pass. What they don't tell you is it's actually more, and if you were to die, they just keep the extra X amount of dollars more than the $10 they told you about. This might be more well-known nowadays than before, but I just try to get this info out as much as possible. LOL. Story 12. I boxed up the first batch of Nokia Lumia smartphones. They were delivered in a blacked-out van with a convoy. All the work our company did was supervised by armed guards. I was part of the crew that sent out letters to BP stockholders when the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico happened. The pages were printed with a very interesting method. that imprinted the text onto the page, but left the rest if the toner was semi-bonded. So the page came out completely black off the printer, straight into an envelope with a special label that was printed out similarly. They were collected by a different blacked out van. I saw all the specs and diagrams 2010 for the 2014 release of the Land Rover Discovery and Range Rover Sport, including detailed engine breakdowns. I still have the book somewhere, as well as like 5 or 64 gigabytes USB brackets that were packaged with them. I can't remember the name of the gallery, but there was a fun set of prints that only 100 or so were sold. The one that sticks with me was a lady lying naked with what looked like bolognese on her, topped with a raw egg. The print sets sold for like 10,000 pounds a pop, and I had a set just chilling in a box. Something like 3,000 sets were printed, and only the best ones went out. Working for a printing company was pretty good sometimes. Story 13. Not a flood forecaster, but I did weather stuff for the government and saw the potential for a massive flood that the flood forecasters were completely ignoring. My supervisor called them into a meeting. We showed them the data, and they were so clueless that they didn't even know which watershed would potentially be affected. I literally had to make a custom map that explained it in black and white. Once reality dawned on them, they got real quiet. Left the room. Major flood forecast was issued something like 2 days later. Ended up costing taxpayers over $500 million. Made worse because they weren't prepared. A flood review was later done. My help was never acknowledged. They blamed bad data and a lack of staff for not being prepared, got a crapload of money and staff, and never talked to me again. Not an NDA. I'm never supposed to discuss it, but screw that. Story 14. That Facebook is every bit as horrible as people think it is. What struck me most is the culture of silence there. You cannot talk openly about concerns of the effects of Facebook as an engineer without vague references of it showing up in performance reviews. Perhaps people have a more comic book style, evil corporation in mind. But in Facebook, coercion happens with performance reviews, strict metrics chasing, and not talking about the broader implications of those metrics. Take, for example, chasing the average session length metric. That is how long you're likely to stay on Facebook at any given time. Seems innocuous at first until you realize this is where radicalization and spread of misinformation happens. Because as it happens, what keeps people's attention the most effectively is sensational posts and polarizing posts targeting people's outrage. Not only does this give you a skewed view of the world, but it rewards the people spreading misinformation and rage bait. It's not that Facebook inherently plans to maximize people's outrage, it's just their metrics chasing makes them the most money by finding these patterns. Then, like I said, it's awfully convenient to just stay silent and count the cash. It's the pinnacle, in my experience, of the banality of evil. Story 15. I used to work in an intelligence agency that we will not mention due to obvious reasons. Back some 15 years ago, said intel agency was collecting email data from the enemies. We had most of the domains tapped, but one was particularly hard to crack, and it was gaining more and more popularity. Don't want to mention which. This is still gray area. So instead of going through the long route of hacking it, we sent a guy to work at the domain company. He got a job, climbed a few ranks, until he had access to the servers, and Bob's your uncle. Story 16. 99% of the time, when you go to a car dealership's website and click the box to chat with a representative, you're actually talking to a person in an office nowhere near the dealership. Almost everything you ask already has a canned response for it. Where I worked, our entire job was to get your contact information to send to the dealership so they could contact you on their own time. Even if you asked a simple question like, "What's the mileage on this truck?" We were to say something like, "I'm having trouble getting that information. Let me get your phone number and email address, and I'll have a salesperson get back to you with the information." I got fired from there because I refused to engage with the scumminess. If someone asked a question and I knew or could find the answer, I'd just tell them. Sometimes people just want to browse and don't want to be hounded by a salesperson to buy an overpriced POS car. I'd say the company I worked for, but last I checked, the boss I had there used Reddit. Story 17. One of the most prestigious consulting companies, starting with M, was going for more diversity in hiring when I was there. Their idea was to reject all CVs that came from males, just like that, without reading. They would also have a filter in their hiring software to only pass on female names included in their filter. Also, in certain places, they would only read CVs coming from people with clearly black names, rejecting everything else. They would hold meetings discussing whether a CV comes from a black person if there was no picture included. Everything just to avoid being called the wrong candidate. If anyone's wondering, these practices are highly illegal. This was in 2017. Then I left, but I doubt they changed their ways. Story 18. Western Africa was where all the major oil companies were looking to drill when fracking got priced out of the market because of the whole Pangea thing and that having been closer to the Permian Basin once upon a time. Also, if you specify a ton of security measures for companies handling your data, you should surprise them. Make sure that the network is isolated the way you think it is. The passwords aren't written on post, it's in the terminals. The cameras work. Physical security isn't compromised. That you're getting what you paid for. Story 19. This is probably not going to surprise anyone, but I have worked and still do work in advertising. I'm still limited to how much I can reveal, and I will not be naming any names. Around the early 2010s, we were developing technology focusing on hyper-localization. We already had access to a plethora of devices because we had personally developed mobile apps for some very big and household name companies, and we also had our SDK in millions of devices via other apps. We tested out our tech in Vegas on the Strip. We wanted to see if we can easily communicate with the devices without raising any alarms for the user or the app developer, assuming we did not want to share the tech with them. We were able to do so with ease as we tested by sending them push notifications. As you can tell, none of this involved permissions from anyone involved. Our goal was to localize customers to the portion of the aisle that they were in. So if they're in aisle 7 of Ralph's, we know that the middle of the aisle is selling cereal, so we will immediately send a notification on some cereal sale. We find this very creepy right now because the average customer has become wary of being monitored. But of course, to us or to any advertiser, the user is just a number. Nobody is ever interested in finding your deep, dark secrets. Before they could go much further with this tech, I left the company for a better opportunity. I don't know what they're doing now, but they are still in business and have expanded. Story 20. I can't name the company, but they had a loyalty program where they collected points that could be redeemed for free services. If a customer made above the average purchase, it'd get flagged for manual review before the points would have been added. As the same people who did their crowded customer service verified the purchases, the bosses just told them to prioritize tickets that would make them money, like people asking to add something to their service, and just delete the tickets about flagged purchases. Those would be then only processed if a customer would contact them and complain about missing points. Story 21. I was working with a game developer as a streamer, and they flew me out to California, wined and dined me. I immediately got about $1,000 worth of game credits to my account to compete in my stream when I got home. I deliberately did not sign a streaming contract, just their NDA. Got lots of goodies, too. People in the community were a bit pissed off about how I just appeared out of nowhere as a streamer and brought the pitchforks. I did eventually establish myself in the community, and people realized I wasn't just some influencer crap. I genuinely loved the game and helped people. For 2 years, I couldn't admit that I was financially compensated. Actually, most gaming NDAs are like this. This one was funny because the game didn't last for long. I know y'all will hate me, but I cannot reveal the company. Too many good people involved to throw under the bus. Just know this is the norm. Story 22. Remember that giant robot fight between the US and Japan? The US team Megabots spent 2+ years and $2.5 million, plus prepping for a real fight. Once our two robots arrived in Japan, we were informed we now had to stage the fight, or otherwise they had found some loophole that would have allowed them to pull out or not allow us to use images of them. We immediately found out why. Their robots looked great, but essentially was foam covered in sheet metal. So due to pride, we weren't able to actually fight, as it would have been a bloodbath. One of the Megabots founders put a video up explaining exactly what went down on our YouTube channel once NDAs expired. The company folded anyways, and the lackluster duel was the main reason for that. Do you know how hard it was to see the response from communities like this one when everyone on the Megabots team also felt duped? We know we let you down and couldn't do a damn thing about it. Outside trying to fight our two robots against each other in a real fight, which ended up being pretty cool. Glad we got to do that at least once before it all came crashing down. Story 23 was a partner on Microsoft's now defunct and canceled Mixer streaming platform. Had to sign an NDA when I joined the program. It was extremely clear as far back as 2018 that Microsoft was planning a pump and dump. They wanted the tech to build up the system we now know as xCloud game streaming. Mixer had the FTL low latency tech, so they bought it. The owners, while passionate, were notorious and shrewd businessmen despite their young age. Basically entrepreneurs. Build the company up, sell it off, move on to the next thing. It became very widely apparent in late 2018 that Microsoft were planning on dipping in the next few years and had zero long-term intention, despite showing otherwise. Also, know a few things about Facebook gaming, but I'm still under NDA with them for now. Story 24. Not really an NDA, but I worked for a PC sales and repairs company. Charged a lot of money for diagnostics, reinstalls, data transfers for most repairs. I automated 99% of the work. Most of it was me running a single command or scheduling multiple things to work throughout the night and day. Customers basically paid $100 to $300 for repairs and reinstalls and data and diagnostics for about 2 minutes of my time. Proper diagnostics, accurate and checked work. Very little effort. I also got paid fall after years and left. The server failed a week later. Declining any ongoing work and maintenance, inner workings and knowledge can die with me as a departing gift. Story 25. During my geology PhD, I visited the site of a proposed waste disposal site. A preliminary geophysical survey identified a strange anomaly, a deep linear feature trending to the south-southwest. Looked like a buried river valley. The site needed investigating for an environmental impact statement or report, part of the planning application. My access to the site and investigation included an NDA. I couldn't publish anything about it until after the rubbish dump was built and a 5-year stay was put on my thesis. Access was restricted to only a few people. My PhD supervisor also thought that the anomaly was an ancient buried river valley, perhaps a few million years old. This is exactly what the people who wanted to build the rubbish dump wanted to hear, as they absolutely could not put a rubbish dump over or near a karst feature, dissolved limestone. Contamination could leak into the groundwater. We drilled into the center of the anomaly in 2003. We encountered peat and gravels, then 40 meters of clayey lake sediments, then some more gravels. But then we found 65 meters of hard clay. In fact, 2 layers of clay, 40 meters of orange clays, and 25 meters of white clay. We hit limestone bedrock at 128 meters depth, 33 meters below sea level. The hard clays were left behind after the limestone dissolved. It was karst, a type of karst called a pocket deposit. They were also found in the UK. The clays were used to make pipes, pipe clay, and cheap pottery. They were around 15 million years old, judging by the fossil pollen and leaves they found. By the time the stay ended, the rubbish dump was built, close to the anomaly, where it should not be.